I'm Tinabeth Piña. American consumers are becoming increasingly diverse, and ads on television, in print, and on billboards recognize the evolving face of our nation, but unfortunately, not as quickly as many of us would like to see. It's been over 40 years since Coca-Cola debuted one of the most iconic ads in television history. Unfortunately, the commercial, which featured a racially diverse, non-stereotypical cast, didn't start a multicultural advertising trend at the time.
I wouldn't say that that commercial necessarily contributed to the advent of multicultural marketing here. Nevertheless, it was a great commercial in terms of embracing diversity within the world.
The idea of happiness and universal love hit a chord with Americans at a time when conflict was dominating headlines. According to Bill Imada, chairman and CEO of the IW Group, what's going on socially affects what we see in the media.
Well, usually some social upheaval will impact advertising. And we're seeing that history kind of plays itself out over and over and over again. So the civil rights movement impact the way we look at African Americans. Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers changed the way we look at Latinos. Sometimes it requires that spark, that catalyst, to get companies and corporations and ad agencies to change.
For years, many print and TV ads perpetuated stereotypes, depicting African Americans as servants, Native Americans as savages, Asians as coolie hat-wearing subordinates, and Latinos as bandits.
Ay, 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 I am the Frito Bandido.
The Frito Bandido ad is an ad that kind of sticks with me for a long time. I think that was really a catalyst, along with the Aunt Jemima ad, for the community, that we cannot continue to be portrayed as servants or as heavy-set people riding donkeys.
The ads of 40, 50 years ago made use of what were then prevailing stereotypes, which now we can look back on and say, that was bad.
How do you get shirts so clean, Mr. Lee?
Ancient Chinese secret.
First of all, the Calgon ad was not designed to build relevance with the Chinese community in the United States. It was designed as what we could call a mainstream or a general market ad. They were used as a creative device. And that is probably a good textbook example of taking a stereotype.
Nowadays, stereotypes aren't as apparent, but still exist. How good are advertisers at depicting realness?
Well, in the past, and the not so distant past, you always saw Asian Americans as doctors, as pharmacists, as engineers, or worse, as ninjas, or geishas, or karate experts. Fast forward 20, 30 years later, you're now seeing Asian Americans, Latinos, African Americans in new roles. You might see mixed race kids. I really like that Cheerio ad, and I thought that was a real milestone. And we're seeing a lot more of those types of ads.
Ads are taking their cues from census numbers. Over 300 million people live in the United States, according to the last census report. And they estimate that by 2042, ethnic consumers will make up more than half of the U.S. population. African Americans, Native Americans, and Asian Americans already have a combined purchasing power estimated at $1.9 trillion, while the purchasing power of Hispanics alone is at $1.2 trillion, larger than the economies of all but 13 countries.
90% of the public recognizes that the United States isn't white America anymore. It's a multicultural country. And most of the people that are here are sons and daughters of immigrants, or people that immigrated here many, many years ago. And if you look at just the Asian American population, we've had double-digit growth in 49 out of 50 states.
Asian Americans are now America's fastest growing ethnic group and have become a powerful economic force as well. The group's buying and spending power is more than the average American household.
With the growth of the Asian population, we're talking almost 60% growth between 2000 and 2013, and spending power that's going to exceed $1 trillion by 2017. Companies are beginning to realize this is a population that they cannot ignore.
Currently, the ad industry has set the standard for portraying Asian Americans positively, casting them in mainstream roles in commercials for McDonald's, Best Buy, and Target.
Do you think the ad industry is ahead of the game?
Yes, I think the ad industry is ahead because it's a lot easier to produce a commercial than it is to produce a full-length movie or television program. But the ad industry over the last probably 5 to 6 years have really led the way in changing the way we look at consumers, and providing that level of diversity that is absolutely needed.
Consumers like to see that, hey, here's a product or service that people like me would use. Now, I think some of the diverse groups in this country are used to not seeing themselves portrayed. So when they do see themselves portrayed, they feel like they've just received a hand-engraved invitation to interact with that brand.
It makes a huge difference when people see themselves in ads. We have seen, for instance, in a variety of ads, whenever there's an Asian American in that ad, Asian Americans, regardless of whether or not they say that they care about this, immediately notice that there's somebody that looks like them in an ad. And that actually increases the level of interest in that particular company and their services and products.
Getting the right ethnic perspective can be tricky. And recently, the Advertising Education Foundation has been visiting college campuses to encourage minorities to pursue careers in advertising. With more diversity behind the scenes, we're far more likely to see more diversity on camera. For Asian American Life, I'm Tinabeth Piña.